Esteemed audience, today we present The Crimson Heart, a story of resilience, hidden truths, and the enduring power of a mother's love. Before we begin, please subscribe to our channel. We invite you to listen. The sterile gleam of the hospital corridor seemed to mock Mary's worn, sensible shoes. Each tile echoed the frantic beat of her own heart. A rhythm played on the drums of desperation. Her son, Tom, a vibrant 4-year-old with eyes the color of summer skies, lay beyond those swinging doors, his small body battling a rare, relentless illness. The doctors, with their hushed tones and empathetic glances, had painted a grim picture, one that required mountains of money Mary simply didn't have. She was a single mother fighting a war she couldn't afford to lose. Her every waking moment was a prayer, a plea, a furious scramble for survival. The weight of her child's fragile life pressed down on her, an invisible, crushing burden. Hope, a flickering candle in a hurricane, was barely clinging on. Her last hope, a flicker born of sheer will, lay in the grand, imposing gates of the Thorne estate. Mary clutched the interview invitation, a stiff formal card that felt impossibly heavy in her hand. The position? Private caregiver for William, a reclusive millionaire, recently confined to a wheelchair after a mysterious accident. Whispers followed his name like shadows. Difficult, temperamental, a recluse haunted by unknown demons. Yet for Tom, Mary would face any demon. The limousine purred, a predatory hum, as it wound its way through manicured lawns towards the mansion. The estate itself was a monument to wealth and solitude, its cold grandeur reflecting the man within. As Mary stepped into the colossal foyer, the air hung heavy with a silence so profound it felt like a presence. A grand staircase, spiraling upwards like a petrified tornado, dominated the space, leading to shadowed corridors. A curt nod from a stern-faced butler directed her to a vast, opulent living room. The room was a museum of priceless artifacts, each piece whispering tales of old money and untouchable privilege. And then she saw him, William, a man forged from sharp angles and shadows, sat rigid in his electric wheelchair by a sprawling bay window. His eyes, dark and piercing like obsidian shards, scanned her with an unnerving intensity that sent a shiver down Mary's spine. He wasn't simply looking. He was dissecting, analyzing, judging. His face, etched with lines of pain and bitterness, was a stark contrast to the youthful vigor one might expect from a man in his prime. He was a caged lion, magnificent, yet wounded, and the air around him crackled with a palpable storm, barely contained. Suddenly, a guttural roar tore through the silence. Without warning, William's hand shot out, sweeping a magnificent porcelain vase from a nearby pedestal. The vase, an antique masterpiece that looked as fragile as Mary's own hope, shattered against the marble fireplace with an explosive crescendo that made the very air vibrate. Shards of delicate porcelain exploded outwards like shrapnel, each fragment a testament to his unchecked rage. Mary instinctively flinched, but not in fear. A sharp, stinging pain erupted on her left earlobe. A sliver of the shattered vase, a tiny, jagged fang, had caught her, leaving a deep, angry gash from which a thin trickle of crimson bloomed against her pale skin. The metallic tang of blood filled her mouth, a grim punctuation mark to the chaotic scene. The butler gasped, rushing forward, but Mary simply raised her hand, stopping him. Her gaze never wavered from William's. His eyes, which had been blazing with destructive fire, now held a flicker of surprise, perhaps even a hint of something unreadable, as he watched her. Most would recoil, scream, or demand retribution. Mary did none of those things.
With a calmness that defied the sudden onslaught of pain, Mary reached into her worn leather handbag. Her movements were fluid, practiced, almost ritualistic. She pulled out a small, well-worn first aid kit, a testament to her life as a mother, always prepared for the unexpected bumps and scrapes of childhood. Carefully, meticulously, she unstoppered a small bottle of antiseptic, its acrid smell cutting through the lingering scent of fine dust and shattered porcelain. "Sir," Mary's voice was low, steady, a counterpoint to the still vibrating echoes of the shattered vase. "I understand your frustration, but violence, even against inanimate objects, rarely solves anything. Perhaps, if you allowed me to assist you, we could find a more constructive outlet for your anger." She poured a few drops of antiseptic onto a cotton pad, wincing almost imperceptibly as the liquid stung the raw wound. Her fingers, though slender, moved with almost surgical precision as she pressed the pad to her ear, staunching the flow of blood. She looked directly at William. Her eyes, though tired, held a depth of compassion that seemed to pierce his icy exterior. It wasn't pity she offered, but a quiet understanding, a reflection of her own battles fought in silence. William stared, utterly transfixed. He had witnessed countless meltdowns, hysterical tears, and indignant outbursts from previous caregivers. But this woman, this Mary with a fresh wound bleeding on her ear, stood there with an unflappable resolve, a stoic grace that bordered on defiance. It was as if she saw not his rage, but the hidden pain that fueled it. And then a memory, hazy and indistinct, flickered at the edge of his consciousness. A fleeting image of a woman, her head tilted, a shadow falling across her ear. He dismissed it as a trick of his tortured mind, a hallucination born of his own desperate search. Yet the seed of suspicion had been planted. You are dismissed," William finally managed, his voice hoarse, the command laced with an unfamiliar tremor. "I don't need a caregiver who cannot even avoid my outbursts." His gaze lingered on the fresh, red line blossoming on her earlobe. It was a stark, almost artistic slash against her fair skin, a crimson mark that seemed to burn itself into his memory. Mary simply nodded, a faint, almost imperceptible curve on her lips. "As you wish, sir. But remember, sometimes the deepest wounds are not visible to the eye, and sometimes the most unexpected helpers can bring the greatest healing." She turned, her movements still graceful, leaving the scattered debris and the speechless millionaire behind. As she walked out, William watched her retreating back, a strange mixture of anger, frustration, and an undeniable nagging curiosity twisting within him. The way she held her head, the quiet determination in her stride, and that fresh, vivid gash on her ear. It wasn't just a physical wound. It felt like a scar on his own consciousness, a mark that suddenly felt profoundly significant. He had dismissed her, but the image of her calm demeanor and that striking crimson mark on her ear refused to leave his mind. He pulled out his phone, his fingers trembling slightly as he dialed his personal assistant. "I need you to investigate someone, a woman named Mary. Find out everything, and pay particular attention to any unusual marks." The quiet urgency in his voice hinted at a deeper mystery, a thread connecting Mary to his tormented past, a thread he was now determined to unravel. The stage was set for a confrontation with destiny, a painful unveiling of truths that had long been buried. The crimson streak on Mary's earlobe, a stark, defiant line against her pale skin, seemed to burn itself into William's memory. It was an anomaly in his otherwise meticulously ordered world, a tiny, yet potent, deviation from the predictable. He had dismissed her, but the image of her stoic face amidst the shattered porcelain, the quiet grace with which she tended her own wound, refused to dissipate. His mind, usually a fortress of logic and cold calculation, was now plagued by an insistent echo from the past, a faint melody that played only for her. The official report from his personal assistant, Mr. Davies, arrived promptly, a neat stack of papers detailing Mary's life with sterile precision. Mary Jensen, single mother, age 28, son, Thomas Jensen, age 4, diagnosed with a rare aggressive form of leukemia. Previous employment, hotel housekeeper. No criminal record, no outstanding debts beyond medical bills that stretched into astronomical figures. The profile painted a picture of quiet desperation, a woman pushed to her limits by life's cruel hand. William scanned the document, his finger tracing the lines of her address, her son's diagnosis, leukemia. The word hung in the air, heavy and somber. It twisted something inside him, a cold knot of unfamiliar empathy. Yet it was the details not in the report that truly gnawed at him, the way her eyes had held his, unfazed by his fury, the effortless way she had moved, and that mark. Mr. Davies, William's voice was sharper than usual, cutting through the silence of his study like a finely honed blade. This report is inadequate. I require more. Specifically, any unique physical characteristics, scars, birthmarks, anything unusual. Mr. Davies, a man of impeccable efficiency and unwavering loyalty, merely nodded. Very good, sir. I'll ensure a more discreet and thorough investigation is conducted. He knew better to question William's obscure directives. The boss had a way of seeing things others missed. Meanwhile, Mary's world remained a relentless treadmill of worry and exhaustion. Tom's treatments were draining, both emotionally and financially. Each visit to the sterile hospital room, each pale little face in the waiting area, was a stark reminder of the fragile line between hope and despair. The weight of Tom's illness was a physical ache in her chest, a constant dull throb that never truly faded. She watched him sleep, his small chest rising and falling with agonizing slowness, and silently vowed to move mountains, to drain oceans if it meant saving him. It was during one of these heart-wrenching hospital visits that David, a man whose gentle kindness had become a balm to her weary soul, appeared. David, a landscape architect with a warm smile and an easy laugh, had met Mary through mutual acquaintances at a charity event for sick children. He had been a consistent, unwavering presence in her life, a steady hand offering support without judgment. He understood her struggle, or so she believed. "Mary," David began, his voice soft, his eyes filled with a concern that seemed genuine. He held her hand, his thumb gently caressing her knuckles. "I know this is a difficult time, but I want to be there for you, for Tom, all the way." Mary looked up, her eyes shadowed with fatigue, but touched by a flicker of gratitude. "You already are, David. More than you know." He took a deep breath, his gaze steady. "Marry me, Mary."
The words hung in the air, a shimmering, impossible bubble. Mary's heart, long dormant to romantic notions, fluttered with a confused mix of relief and trepidation. Marriage, a stable home, someone to share the burden, to help with Tom's exorbitant medical bills. It felt like a lifeline thrown into a raging sea. David had been kind, steady, reliable. He was a beacon in her storm, and he genuinely seemed to love Tom. For Tom's sake, Mary felt herself leaning towards the promise of security, a pragmatic choice over a romantic ideal she could no longer afford. She imagined Tom having a stable family, a father figure, even if it wasn't the fantastical love story she might have once dreamed of. The image was comforting, a warm blanket against the cold reality of her life. "David," she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. I don't know what to say."
"Say yes," he urged, his grip tightening on her hand. "Let me take care of you both. Let me be Tom's father." The offer was too tempting to refuse, a desperate plea answered. It promised a future where Tom's well-being wasn't solely her responsibility, where the crushing weight of financial strain might finally lessen. Mary's silent desperation, a constant companion, whispered its counsel. "This is for Tom. This is survival." "Yes," she breathed, the word a fragile promise. "Yes, David, I will." Unbeknownst to Mary, William's own world was spiraling into a maelstrom of familial pressure. His parents, pillars of Boston's elite, were increasingly vocal about his unmarried status and lack of an heir. His accident had only amplified their anxieties, turning their discreet hints into open demands. "William," his mother had declared over a frigid dinner, her voice like polished ice, "it's time you settled down. The Thorne legacy, it needs an heir. A healthy one." His father, usually taciturn, had merely nodded, his gaze unwavering. The burden of legacy, of ancient wealth and expectations, weighed heavily on William's already tormented soul. He was a symbol, not a son, and his disability now made him feel like a broken link in a pristine chain. His parents' pressure was a relentless undertow, pulling him deeper into a bitter resentment. He had tried to find the woman from that fateful night, the one with the heart-shaped necklace. He'd commissioned private investigators, spent countless hours poring over cold cases and hospital records from 4 years ago, all to no avail. She was a ghost, a haunting memory, leaving only the scar on his soul and a vague, persistent ache in his phantom limbs. He often sketched her from behind, a lone figure with a certain elegance, a particular tilt of her head. These sketches filled his private art studio, a testament to his obsession. One crisp autumn afternoon, William found himself in the sprawling botanical gardens on his estate, a place he usually avoided. He was restless, the incessant demands of his family echoing in his ears. He maneuvered his wheelchair past a secluded rose arbor when he overheard voices. "So she finally agreed." David's voice, familiar yet subtly different, resonated from behind a thick hedge of hydrangeas. William froze. David? What was he doing here? "Excellent." A second voice, male, deeper, and unfamiliar to William, replied. "The old man is getting antsy. This marriage will be the perfect way to secure the asset. No one will ever suspect." William felt a cold dread creep up his spine. Secure the asset? No one will ever suspect? His mind, sharp and analytical despite his physical limitations, immediately went to Mary. David, his old friend whom he had known since their boarding school days, the easygoing, charming David. The pieces, though fragmented, began to shift into a disturbing mosaic. He couldn't hear the rest of the conversation as David and the mysterious man moved farther away, their voices fading into indistinct murmurs. But the words he had heard, the clandestine nature of the meeting, resonated with an ominous hum. What asset? And why did it involve Mary?
The incident left William deeply unsettled. He had always prided himself on his ability to read people, to detect deception. But David had always been a loyal, if somewhat impulsive friend. This overheard conversation, however, cast a long, unsettling shadow over their long-standing camaraderie. He decided to expand Mr. Davies' investigation, not just into Mary, but into David as well. A new suspicion, cold and sharp as a shard of glass, began to fester in William's heart, pushing aside the familiar pangs of his own unresolved past. The thought of David, his friend, possibly using Mary, stirred a protectiveness William hadn't known he possessed. It was a stark contrast to his usual detached indifference, a subtle shift in his internal landscape. That night, alone in his sprawling bedroom, William clutched the framed drawing he had painstakingly made, the back of a woman, her hair pulled into a loose bun, a certain curve to her neck. He ran a finger over the phantom outline of a necklace. The memory of that night, fueled by a drug he was forced to consume, was a distorted kaleidoscope, but the image of the woman's graceful form, the way her hair smelled of jasmine and moonlight, had remained stubbornly vivid. And now, Mary, the way she had moved, the subtle curve of her neck, and the quiet dignity in her eyes, it was too much to be a mere coincidence. The unseen thread of destiny seemed to be pulling them closer, knot by agonizing knot. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that his life, and perhaps Mary's, was about to unravel in ways neither of them could foresee. The game was no longer just about finding a caregiver. It was about uncovering a truth that threatened to shatter everything he thought he knew. The Thorne estate, a fortress of opulence and secrets, had become Mary's new, unsettling routine. Each day she navigated its silent corridors, the vastness of the mansion a stark contrast to the cramped, love-filled apartment she shared with Tom. Her every action, every gentle word spoken to William was a calculated move in her silent war against Tom's illness. She was a warrior of necessity, her armor woven from exhaustion and unwavering maternal devotion. William remained an enigma, a man shrouded in a perpetual cloud of brooding resentment. He rarely spoke beyond curt commands, his eyes often fixed on some distant, unseen point, as if perpetually gazing into the abyss of his own past. Yet Mary sensed a flicker of something beneath the icy facade, a raw, unaddressed pain that resonated deeply with her own quiet suffering. William, however, was far from indifferent. Mary's presence in his home, a constant, unsettling reminder of that fateful encounter, chipped away at his carefully constructed defenses. He watched her, not overtly, but with the furtive intensity of a predator observing its prey, or perhaps a man desperately seeking a missing piece of his soul. He noticed the way her slender fingers, usually so gentle when tending to his needs, would clench almost imperceptibly when she received a call about Tom's latest medical bill. He saw the subtle shadows under her eyes, the faint tremor in her hand when she poured his tea. These were not the signs of a mere caregiver. They were the battle scars of a mother waging a silent, desperate war. The new report from Mr. Davies, meticulous and chillingly precise, had confirmed the superficial details: the scar on her ear, a tiny, almost imperceptible line, a ghostly echo of the shattered vase. It aligned perfectly with the mark from that night. But William needed more than a ghost of a memory. He needed proof. The phantom ache in his legs, a constant companion since the accident, often flared with a vengeance, mirroring the turmoil in his mind. These episodes left him particularly vulnerable, stripping away his carefully maintained composure. One afternoon, a particularly violent spasm seized his legs, sending a wave of agony through him. His usual stoicism fractured, replaced by a guttural groan.
Mary, ever vigilant, was at his side instantly. "Are you all right, Sir William?" Her voice was soft, laced with genuine concern, devoid of the usual feigned sympathy he so despised. "No," he gritted out, his jaw clenched, sweat beading on his forehead. "Just help me stretch my leg. Gently." As Mary knelt beside his wheelchair, her hands, surprisingly strong, began to work on his stiff muscles. Her touch was firm yet gentle, a stark contrast to the brutality of his pain. William, for the first time in years, allowed himself to relax, to surrender to another's touch. The rhythmic kneading of her fingers, the steady warmth radiating from her palms, began to soothe not just his physical torment, but the tempest raging within him. In a moment of accidental grace, as Mary shifted slightly, her hand brushing against her own blouse, a flicker of silver caught William's eye. It wasn't just any piece of jewelry. It was a small, tarnished silver necklace, shaped like a heart,
but distinctly, unmistakably, broken cleanly in two. One half of the heart lay nestled against the fabric, while the other, a jagged tear visible where it should have connected, was somehow missing. William's breath hitched. His heart, long a cold, solitary chamber, now hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. It was the necklace, the crimson heart, split asunder just as his own life had been shattered that night. The very same necklace he had worn, the one that had been torn from his neck in the struggle, leaving him with only half, a constant, agonizing reminder of his brutal sin. He had commissioned dozens of identical necklaces over the years, hoping to find the matching half, but always in vain. And now, here it was, on Mary. A jolt, like an electric current, shot through William. His mind raced, connecting the dots with a blinding, terrifying speed. The scar on her ear, the date of her son's birth, her uncanny calm amidst his rage, and now this broken heart. The universe, in its cruel, ironic humor, had brought her back to him. The ghost of his past, the woman he had wronged so terribly, had become his caregiver, the woman who bore his child. Mary, oblivious to the earthquake shaking William's carefully constructed world, finished stretching his leg. "Better, Sir William?" she asked, her gaze innocent, kind. William could only nod, his throat suddenly dry. He needed to get a sample, a piece of irrefutable evidence. He had to know. "Mary," he managed, his voice a strained whisper, I think I need some fresh air. Could you help me to the conservatory?" As Mary carefully wheeled him through the labyrinthine corridors, William's mind raced, formulating a plan. He had to be subtle, foolproof. The thought of confronting her without absolute certainty was unbearable. He knew he possessed a hairbrush he had recently used with a few strands of his own dark hair. Now he needed a sample from Tom. Later that day, Mary brought Tom to the estate for a short visit, a rare treat she hoped would cheer him. William watched from a distance as Mary helped Tom play with his toy car on the plush carpet of the drawing room. Tom, a small, fragile beacon of innocent joy, laughed, his bright eyes sparkling. William's heart ached with a longing he had never known possible. He had a son he had condemned to a life of pain and suffering, unknowingly, carelessly. "Tom," William called out, his voice softer than Mary had ever heard it. "Come here for a moment, young man. Let me see that magnificent car." Tom, a little wary but intrigued by the imposing man in the wheelchair, shyly approached. William extended a hand, his touch surprisingly gentle as he ruffled the boy's soft, brown hair. He murmured, "What a fine head of hair you have, young fellow." His fingers subtly, swiftly, plucking a single strand from Tom's head. It was a deft, almost imperceptible movement, honed by years of strategic calculation. Mary, focused on Tom's joy, didn't notice.
That night, the two hair samples, one from William's brush, one from Tom's innocent head, lay in separate, sterile envelopes. William meticulously labeled them, his hands shaking slightly. He immediately dispatched them to the most reputable genetics lab in the country, requesting an expedited DNA test. His mind was a maelstrom of emotions, fear, hope, a crushing wave of guilt, and a desperate, burgeoning love for the child he might have. The waiting was an agony, each ticking second in eternity. The image of the broken crimson heart necklace, Mary's stoic face, and Tom's laughing eyes haunted him. He was on the precipice of a revelation that would shatter his solitary existence, forcing him to confront not only his past actions, but the very definition of fatherhood. The truth, like a relentless tide, was coming, and William knew with chilling certainty that it would change everything. The day of the wedding dawned with a deceptive innocence, a crisp autumn morning, bathed in the golden light of a promise that would soon shatter. For Mary, it was a tapestry woven with threads of hope and weary resignation. The white gown, a fragile confection of lace and silk, felt impossibly heavy. It was a symbol of security for Tom, a shield against the relentless storm of medical bills and uncertainty, rather than a testament to a grand romance. She had convinced herself that David's steady presence, his apparent devotion to Tom, was enough. Love, in its traditional sense, felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. Yet, a quiet unease, a faint whisper of doubt lingered at the edges of her consciousness, a discordant note in the carefully orchestrated symphony of her future. William, meanwhile, was a man on the precipice, consumed by a tempest of emotions. The DNA results, stark and undeniable, had ignited a firestorm within him. Fatherhood. The word resonated with an unfamiliar, profound weight. He had a son, a precious, vulnerable child battling for his life, a child he had unknowingly abandoned to the care of a woman he had wronged beyond measure. The guilt was a suffocating shroud, thick and suffocating. But beneath the guilt, a fierce, primal protectiveness had ignited, a roaring inferno. He had to stop this wedding, not just for Tom, but for Mary, whom he now saw through a new lens, a woman of extraordinary resilience, a victim of his past recklessness, and, as he now suspected, David's insidious manipulation. His investigation into David had yielded a chilling portrait. Mr. Davies, with his characteristic thoroughness, had unearthed a series of dubious financial dealings, shell corporations, and suspiciously timed investments linked to David. It painted a picture of a man drowning in debt, desperate for a lifeline. The overheard conversation in the garden now pulsed with sinister clarity. Secure the asset. Mary was that asset, her connection to William the key to David's desperate gambit. William's blood ran cold. David wasn't merely a friend. He was a snake in the grass, poised to strike at the most vulnerable among them. The grand old church, a bastion of tradition and solemn vows, hummed with hushed anticipation. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting kaleidoscopic patterns across the polished pews. David stood at the altar, a picture of confident charm in his tailored suit, his smile a practiced mask of adoration. He occasionally glanced towards the back, a glint of triumph in his eyes that Mary, in her anxious state, missed entirely. The organ music swelled, a majestic prelude to Mary's entrance. Mary, her heart a fragile bird trapped in her ribs, began her slow walk down the aisle. Each step was a commitment, not just to David, but to Tom's future. Her gaze was fixed on David, her mind already picturing a life of quiet stability, a safe haven for her son. Just as she reached the altar, a sudden, jarring screech echoed through the solemn space. The heavy oak doors at the back of the church burst open with a resounding thud, drawing every single gaze. All eyes swiveled towards the unexpected disruption.
There, silhouetted against the bright morning light, sat William. He was in his motorized wheelchair, positioned at the very center of the doorway, a figure of dramatic defiance. His usually placid features were contorted with a raw, desperate intensity. The air in the church, previously filled with hushed anticipation, now crackled with a palpable, electric tension. "Stop!" William's voice, usually a low, controlled murmur, boomed through the hallowed halls, amplified by the sudden, stunned silence. His words reverberated, a seismic shockwave that ripped through the fabric of the ceremony. "This wedding, it cannot proceed." A collective gasp rippled through the congregation. Mary froze, her hand clutching a bouquet of white roses, trembling. David's confident smile vanished, replaced with a mask of furious disbelief. "William, what in God's name are you doing?" he hissed, his face draining of color. William ignored him, his gaze fixed solely on Mary. "Mary," he cried, his voice thick with a mixture of urgency and anguish. "You cannot do this. This is a mistake." The church erupted in a cacophony of whispers. Confusion, outrage, and bewildered curiosity swirled like a tangible cloud. William, heedless of the shocked stares, motioned to Mr. Davies, who promptly stepped forward holding a sealed envelope. "Ladies and gentlemen," William announced, his voice ringing with newfound authority, "I apologize for this intrusion, but a grave injustice is about to be committed. A truth that has been hidden for too long must now be revealed." He took the envelope from Mr. Davies, his hand shaking, but his resolve ironclad. "Mary, David, and all assembled here today, Tom is not merely Mary's son. He is my son." He dramatically held up the DNA test results, the stark white paper a beacon of undeniable proof against the backdrop of the vibrant stained glass. "Thomas Jensen is my biological child." The declaration hit the congregation like a thunderclap. A stunned silence even deeper than before descended. Mary's world tilted precariously on its axis. The words echoed in her mind, a chaotic symphony of disbelief and a chilling, dawning realization. His son. The face of the cold, furious man who had thrown a vase at her just weeks ago was now proclaiming paternity to her child. It was a twist of fate so cruel, so impossibly ironic, that it stole her breath. But David was the first to react. His eyes, normally warm and reassuring, now blazed with a terrifying, untamed fury. He lunged towards Mary, his hand gripping her arm with a desperate, painful force. "Mary, don't listen to him. He's insane. He's just trying to ruin everything." His voice was a raw snarl, devoid of the charming veneer he usually presented. "No, David, you are the insane one. Tell them, David. Tell them why you're really marrying Mary. Tell them about your debts. Tell them about your plan to secure the asset." David's face contorted, a mask of desperation and hatred. He was cornered, his carefully constructed facade crumbling before everyone's eyes. He knew William had him. His gaze darted wildly, seeking an escape, but there was none. You bastard," he spat at William, his voice venomous. You always had everything, didn't you? Money, power, family. Well, I had to scratch and claw for every single thing." Then a dark, shocking truth spilled from David's lips, a desperate final attempt to deflect and wound. "You want the truth, William? You want to know what else I know? The accident, William, the one that put you in that chair? It wasn't an accident. It was a setup. Your own uncle, your family, wanting to control your fortune. I was there. I saw it. I was supposed to keep quiet, to watch you squirm." David's words hung in the air, thick with malice and a chilling realization. The confession was a desperate, unhinged torrent, a final act of self-destruction.
The entire church gasped again, a collective wave of horror washing over them. Mary felt the blood drain from her face. This was too much. Her child's father, a man who had forced himself upon her, now accusing his own family of attempted murder? And David, the man she was about to marry, a complicit witness, a betrayer of both friendship and love? David, seeing the utter devastation on Mary's face, finally snapped. The mask of charm fell completely, revealing the raw, ugly truth beneath. His eyes, burning with a mix of fury and self-pity, fixed on Mary. "Yes, I married you for money. I knew Tom was his. I knew you'd be my golden ticket, my way to get a piece of the Thorne Empire, to finally bury him. You, Mary, you were just a means to an end. I never cared about the kid. I only cared about what he could get me." His voice rose to a shrill, hysterical pitch, filled with unbridled contempt. "You naive little fool. Did you really think I loved you? I just needed a way in, and your pathetic little sick child was the perfect bait." Mary's world, already teetering, finally imploded. The words were a physical blow, stripping away every last shred of dignity and hope. The beautiful white gown suddenly felt like a shroud, suffocating her. Her vision blurred, tears stinging her eyes. She wasn't just betrayed, she was used, her child's suffering exploited. The altar, meant for sacred vows, had become a stage for the unveiling of monstrous deception. She stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a cry. The white roses, falling from her grasp like shattered dreams. The silence that followed David's venomous confession in the sacred halls of the church was more deafening than any scream. It hung heavy, suffocating, as if the very air refused to carry such bitter truths. Mary, shattered and adrift, stumbled back. The white roses, symbols of a pure, hopeful future, falling from her trembling grasp to lie scattered like broken promises on the cold marble floor. Her heart, already a fragile thing, felt as though it had been pulverized, leaving behind only the jagged fragments of betrayal and shock. She was used, her child's suffering exploited. The altar, meant for sacred vows, had become a stage for the unveiling of monstrous deception. William, witnessing Mary's utter devastation, felt a surge of raw, primal protectiveness, a feeling that eclipsed his own anger and vindication. The sight of her, so vulnerable yet still radiating an inherent strength, struck him deeper than any blow. He had seen strong women break, but Mary, even in this moment of profound betrayal, possessed a core of unbroken spirit. He knew, with an absolute certainty, that he had to be her anchor, her shield. He was the architect of her past pain, but he could, perhaps, be the builder of her future. He pushed his wheelchair forward, the whirring of its motor a stark contrast to the stunned silence of the onlookers. He bypassed David, who stood frozen, his face a mask of exposed villainy, utterly defeated. He stopped directly in front of Mary, his gaze unwavering, pleading. "Mary," he began, his voice surprisingly gentle, yet firm enough to cut through the oppressive silence. Mary slowly raised her tear-filled eyes, the agony etched on her face a mirror of the turmoil in his own soul.
"I know what this must feel like," William continued, his voice heavy with a confession he had longed to make. "Betrayal, deception, and a secret that rips your world apart. I understand, because I am guilty of the greatest deception of all." He paused, taking a shaky breath, the words tasting bitter on his tongue. 4 years ago, at the K Hotel, I was given a powerful aphrodisiac, a cruel prank by my so-called friends. I found myself in a state of absolute delirium, a prisoner in my own body. When I saw you, I didn't know what I was doing. I was barely conscious, my mind clouded, my will completely overridden. But that doesn't excuse it. Nothing can excuse what I did to you, Mary. He saw the shock register in Mary's eyes, followed by a flicker of understanding, a grudging recognition of the possibility of circumstances beyond his control. But it was not enough. I have spent every day since then living in a prison of my own making, haunted by your image, by the memory of a woman I wronged so terribly, William confessed, his voice thick with genuine remorse. I searched for you, Mary, desperately, but you were gone, like a ghost in the wind. And then I had my own accident, a cruel twist of fate, or perhaps karma, that put me in this chair. He looked down at his useless legs, a profound sadness in his eyes. But Mary, the biggest secret, the one that truly changed everything. Tom is our son. He repeated the words, letting them hang in the air, allowing their weight to settle between them. I confirmed it, and I now know about his illness. He reached out, a trembling hand rising to cup her cheek, oblivious to the stares of the stunned congregation. Mary, I will move heaven and earth to save him. He is my son,
and he needs us both. A new wave of emotion, raw and overwhelming, washed over Mary. Not only was the father of her child standing before her, confessing a truth that explained so much, but he was also offering a lifeline, a glimmer of hope for Tom. It was an agonizing paradox. The man who caused her deepest trauma was now her only chance at salvation. She looked at Tom, who had been quietly comforted by a kind usher, his innocent eyes wide with confusion. His small, fragile life depended on her choice. Mary took a shaky breath, the scent of crushed roses filling the air. "William," she whispered, her voice barely audible. How can I possibly believe you? After everything. After David's lies." "Because I'm not asking for your love, Mary. Not yet," William said, his voice husky with unshed tears. "I'm asking for your trust, for a chance to atone, for a chance to be a father to our son. And there's something else, Mary. Something David said about my accident. My own family, they may have been involved. They've been pressuring me relentlessly for an heir, for someone to continue the Thorne legacy, especially since my accident has left me incomplete." He looked down at his useless legs, a profound sadness in his eyes. "They're trying to control me, to find a suitable match, a healthy heir. And the truth is, Mary, I have a degenerative condition, exacerbated by the accident, a condition that could eventually claim my life. My only hope for recovery, for walking again, is a bone marrow transplant. My family has been searching for a match, subtly, persistently. Perhaps this is all part of a larger, darker game they're playing."
The church, previously a tableau of shocked faces, now buzzed with renewed whispers. The Thorne family, prominent members of the community, sat aghast, their carefully constructed reputation crumbling around them. Mary looked from William's pleading eyes to Tom's innocent face, then back to the scattered petals on the floor. Her heart, though bruised, began to stir with a new, fierce resolve. She was a mother, and her son's life was paramount. David's betrayal, though devastating, had inadvertently cleared the path. There were no more illusions, no more false promises, only raw, terrifying truth. "William," she said, her voice stronger now, a steel thread beneath the tremor, "if what you say is true, then Tom deserves to know his father, and he deserves a chance to live." She extended her hand, not in love, but in a tentative truce, a desperate pact forged in the crucible of despair. "Help me save our son." William's face, etched with pain and remorse, softened with a profound relief. He grasped her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers, a silent promise exchanged between them. The touch was a spark, igniting a fragile, embryonic hope. The wedding was definitively off, a forgotten nightmare. The altar stood empty, but a new, unforeseen bond had been forged, not of romantic love, but of shared destiny, a desperate alliance to save a child. The ensuing days were a whirlwind of activity. William, with renewed purpose, threw himself into Tom's case. The best doctors, cutting-edge therapies, and experimental treatments were brought to bear. His vast resources, once a symbol of his isolating power, were now a tool for salvation. He spent hours by Tom's bedside, reading him stories, his voice, usually gruff, softening into a gentle murmur. Mary watched him, a quiet observer, seeing glimpses of the man he could be, the father Tom deserved. The search for William's bone marrow donor also intensified. The family, now aware of his vulnerability and the shocking public display, begrudgingly cooperated, hoping to salvage their image. The irony was not lost on Mary. The very family that might have tried to harm William now desperately sought to save him for their own purposes. One afternoon, as Mary sat by Tom's bed, holding his small, frail hand, William wheeled himself in. "Mary," he said, his voice tinged with hope she hadn't heard before. "They found a match for Tom, a perfect one. The treatment can begin next week." Mary's breath hitched. Tears of pure, unadulterated relief streamed down her face. It was a miracle, a new dawn. "And for me," William continued, his gaze meeting hers, a silent question in his eyes, "they found a match too, a distant relative. It won't be easy, but there's a chance at a full recovery." Mary looked at him, truly looked at him, for the first time without the lens of bitterness or desperation. She saw not just the powerful millionaire, not just the man from that terrible night, but a flawed, complex human being fighting for his own life and for the life of their son. The crimson heart, once broken, now pulsed with the faint, hopeful rhythm of healing. They were two broken pieces brought together by fate and tragedy, now striving to become whole, not just for themselves, but for the crimson heart of their child. The road ahead was long, fraught with uncertainty, but they would walk it together. A family, forged not in perfect love, but in the crucible of shared pain and the unwavering promise of a new beginning.